I don't remember driving out of the parking garage. I remember the elevator and the particular fluorescent hum of it. And I remember standing in front of 11 people whose salaries I had personally approved for years, telling them, in the calm, measured voice I have spent 2 decades perfecting, that 400 of their colleagues would not have jobs by Friday. I remember someone's pen clicking over and over somewhere down the table. In the hallway afterward, one of the junior directors fell into step beside me just long enough to say, "I don't know how you do that." I nodded, the way you nodded a compliment, and kept walking. I had 20 years of practice believing that was a compliment. My phone buzzed twice before I reached the elevator. My son, "Are you coming home tonight?" I looked at it and did not answer. Then my wife, "He stayed up for you again." I turned the phone face down on the dashboard before I'd even left the garage, the way I'd been turning things face down my whole life. I do not remember the 40 minutes of highway that put me in Maple Hollow, a town I had no reason to be in. At an hour, I should have been walking through my own front door. What I remember next is gravel under my shoes, and a green so complete it felt like walking into a held breath. The park sat at the low end of town, where the road gave up trying to be a road and became, instead, a wide gravel loop around a pond the color of hammered pewter. October had gotten into everything. The maples along the water had gone the deep, bruised orange of something about to let go. And every so often the wind took a few leaves at once and sent them down in a slow, spinning argument with the ground. Smoke curled from a chimney somewhere behind the tree line, unhurried, the way smoke only moves in towns where nobody is late for anything. I had spent 11 years building a company on the premise that everyone, everywhere, was already late for something. Standing at the edge of that water, I understood for the first time how much that premise had cost me. I found a bench because my legs had stopped consulting me on the matter. Plain wood, silvered with weather, facing the pond at an angle that caught the last low gold of the afternoon. I sat, put my elbows on my knees, and did the thing I had not allowed myself to do in a conference room full of people whose lives I had just detonated. I put my head down and I shook, silently, for a long time, without a single tear actually arriving to justify it. "They've got about 20 more minutes of light left in them," a voice said, "if you're waiting on the mallards." I hadn't heard him arrive. Maybe 80 canvas jacket gone soft at the elbows, a paper bag of bread heels under one arm. He lowered himself onto the far end of my bench with the unhurried permission of a man who had never once worried about imposing on a stranger. He didn't ask what was wrong. He tore a heel of bread into pieces and threw it out over the water in a low, easy arc. "That one there," he said, nodding at a duck shouldering past 2 smaller ones. "Steals from the little ones every year. Same duck or his grandson, I can't tell anymore. Ducks all look like they're covering for each other." He threw another piece well past the thief, toward the smaller ones, and looked pleased with himself when it worked. "You fish?" "No," I said. "Didn't figure you did. Man in a suit like that doesn't usually fish." He said it without judgment, the way you'd note the weather. Good pond for it, though. My wife used to say I only came for the ducks and pretended the fishing rod was an alibi. We sat like that for a while, not talking, just the small, ongoing business of bread and ducks. I want to be honest about how much I needed that, the not talking. Every relationship I had built in 15 years of climbing came with an unspoken invoice attached, some expectation of performance. This man wanted nothing from me, except, apparently, help deciding which duck deserved the next piece. "Rough one?" he said eventually, not looking over. "Something like that." My father used to say a man who cries is a man who hasn't found anything worth being strong for yet. I told him. I don't know why I told him that. I have never told anyone that, not my wife, not the 2 therapists I quietly stopped seeing after 3 sessions each. He didn't answer right away. He threw another piece of bread, watched it land, watched the thief duck get there first anyway. My father used to say the same kind of thing. He said finally. Different words, same shape. Another piece of bread. Never cried at his funeral. Stood there the whole service with my jaw set like I was posing for something. Everyone told me afterward how strong I'd been. Meant it as a compliment. He didn't say anything else for a moment. And I found myself waiting for the rest of it. The tidy lesson, the turn. It didn't come. He just watched the water. 41 years later, he said eventually, stood the exact same way at my wife's funeral. Got the exact same compliment from the exact same kind of people. I thought of the man in the hallway, telling me he didn't know how I did it. I understood, for the first time, that he might not have meant it as a compliment either. That sounds like it cost you something, I said. Cost me a son, he said. Not all at once. He just got tired, I think, of watching me be strong at everything that should have made me weak. Now he calls twice a year, and we talk about the Phillies for 11 minutes and hang up before either of us has to mean anything. He didn't dress it up as advice. He didn't turn to me and tell me what to do with it. He just let it sit on the bench between us, one more piece of bread nobody had thrown yet. The light had gone from gold to the deep, bruised blue that isn't quite evening yet. The pond had gone still enough to hold the whole sky in it, upside down and slightly trembling. I cried finally, sometime after the bread was gone. Not loudly. A slow, silent leaking I didn't bother hiding. Mostly because I'd run out of the energy hiding requires. He didn't reach for me. Didn't offer a practiced, sympathetic murmur. He just stayed exactly where he was, watching the water like a man who understood that some things don't need witnessing to be real, only company. Thank you, I said when I could talk again. Don't thank me, he said, standing slowly, joints announcing themselves. Wasn't my doing. I just happened to be the bread. He was 3 steps down the gravel path before I found my voice again. What's your name? Doesn't matter much, he said, not unkindly over his shoulder. You won't remember it as well as you'll remember the ducks. I watched him go until the maples curved him out of sight, and then, because some part of me already knew what I would find and needed to find it anyway, I stood up and walked around to the back of the bench. The plaque was small, brass gone soft green at the edges, the way brass does when nobody polishes it anymore, but somebody still visits it. In loving memory of Eleanor. She fed the ducks first and asked questions second. I drove home slower than I have ever driven anywhere in my life. My son was still awake when I got in, propped up in bed with a book he wasn't really reading. You're home late, he said. Then, are you okay? I'm fine, I said. The reflex was instant. 38 years old. Older than he was, older than the company, older than anything I'd built. I was all ready turned to go, the way I always did. I stopped in the doorway. "Actually," I said. "No." He didn't say anything. He just waited the way children do when they've decided something rare is happening and don't want to scare it off. I sat on the edge of his bed, the way my own father never once did. And I didn't manage a speech. I didn't have one. I told him I'd had a hard day. I told him I'd cried in a park in front of a stranger who fed ducks for a living, more or less. And that it hadn't made me weaker, only lighter, though I said it clumsily, in pieces. Nothing like a man who'd rehearsed it. He nodded slowly, filing it away the way he files everything away, and didn't ask anything else that night. Some Saturdays now, when the weather holds, we drive back out to that bench with a bag of bread heels of our own. We've never seen the old man again. I've stopped needing to. Last Saturday, my son threw a piece too far and the thief duck got it anyway. He laughed, then went quiet the way he does right before he asks something he's been carrying around all week. "Dad." "Yeah." "Were you sad again this week?" I looked out at the water. The old version of me was already halfway to no before I caught it. "Yeah," I said. "A little." He nodded, like that was a perfectly reasonable answer, and threw the next piece of bread. If you believe the world still needs stories about kindness, hope, and ordinary people doing extraordinary things, welcome home. Subscribe to Bekalia Studios, and let's keep these stories alive together.